July 21st, 1943, 0630 hours, Buna Track, New Guinea. The jungle is already awake, sweating, breathing, humming with insects that never seem to sleep. Dawn doesn't arrive here so much as it collapses onto the earth, heavy and wet, like a soaked blanket thrown over the trees. The air presses against skin and cloth. It has weight. It beads on steel, on rifle stocks, on cheeks. Every inhale tastes faintly of mold and crushed leaves and something sour underneath. Rot that never dries. An Imperial Japanese Army captain lowers his binoculars and allows himself a moment of confidence. His name is Captain Takahashi, early 30s, clean-shaven, a graduate of the academy who still wears discipline like armor. He has marched through heat and hunger and rain without complaint. He has watched men collapse from exhaustion and labeled it training. He has seen soldiers die and called it honor. That language, discipline, endurance, spirit, has carried him through every hardship of this war. Across a small clearing, the enemy is halted. American troops have stopped moving. Helmets are off, shirts are rolled, sleeves are buttoned tight at the wrists despite the heat. One man crouches over a dented steel pot, water boiling steadily. Another applies a thick, foul-smelling grease to his exposed skin, carefully covering every inch. A third works methodically at the ground, dumping stagnant water from shallow depressions, scraping leaves and larvae into the undergrowth. They are not resting. They are preparing. Takahashi watches in silence. To him, the scene makes no sense, not because it looks foolish, but because it contradicts everything he has been taught to value. Time is precious. Movement is life. Momentum wins battles. Yet here the Americans are, deliberately still, devoting precious minutes to tasks that do not involve weapons or formations. He exhales softly, cleaning. Even with the enemy close, the Americans are focused on things that seem, to Takahashi, secondary. Hygiene drills, mosquito control, water treatment. In the Imperial Japanese Army, such concerns exist, but they are never central. They are background matters addressed when convenient, endured when unavoidable. To elevate them feels unnecessary. A soldier with spirit does not fear filth. A warrior endures. That belief is not cruelty. It is culture. It is reinforced in classrooms, in field exercises, in the unspoken expectations of the officer corps. Hardship strengthens. Discomfort purifies. A man who dwells on dirt, insects, or illness risks softening his resolve. Takahashi has lived by that code, so he turns away, certain of the outcome. The jungle will test both armies. One will prove worthy. He does not yet realize that the test has already begun, because the jungle is not an opponent that responds to courage. It cannot be intimidated. It does not care about rank or tradition or belief. It does not distinguish between the brave and the careless. It only takes. And in New Guinea, it takes quietly at first. The signs are subtle, easy to overlook if you are not trained to see them. A man who is slower to stand at dawn, a man who sweats excessively, then suddenly stops sweating at all. A man whose hands tremble when he ties his boots. A man who asks, only once, for a pause, then never asks again because pride speaks louder than pain. Takahashi's unit has been living with these signs for months. Their camps are carved directly out of mud and jungle. Trenches are shallow, waterlogged ditches. Uniforms never fully dry. Boots stay damp for days at a time. Cuts do not heal cleanly here. They swell, redden, split open. What should be a minor scrape becomes a lingering wound, then an infection, then something that can remove a man from the fight entirely. The men adapt. They endure. They accept it. They believe this is the price of strength. What they do not yet understand is that endurance alone will not save them, and that the jungle is already keeping score. If the Americans are weaker, Takahashi thinks, then nature will punish them first. But the Americans have made an enemy out of nature in a way the Japanese have not. Back in cleaner places, lecture halls, briefing rooms, places where paper stays dry, American manuals dedicate entire sections to what looks, on the surface, like nonsense in the middle of war. Latrines placed downstream and downwind. Water sources protected like ammunition dumps. Mosquito nets treated like body armor. Daily checks for rashes, fever symptoms, foot rot. Men assigned every day to drain puddles, to clear brush, to burn trash, to police sanitation even when they'd rather be sleeping. To Takahashi, it's laughable. To the jungle, it's a declaration of war. And right now, on this humid morning, Takahashi does not see the tally that has already begun. He doesn't see the American medic who will keep a rifle company alive simply by enforcing those bitter tablets and those humiliating inspections. He doesn't see the Japanese private who is already running a low fever and will hide it until he collapses, because admitting weakness is worse than pain. He doesn't see the coming weeks, the sick tents, the whispered prayers, the men who stop walking and start crawling, the unit that remains strong on paper but hollow in reality. All Takahashi sees is an enemy boiling water in a dented pot. He smiles at their weakness. Then he motions his men forward, deeper into the green, deeper into the wet, deeper into a battlefield that isn't drawn on any map. And somewhere in the shade, almost invisible, you can hear the thin, high whine begin to rise. Not gunfire, something worse. The beliefs that guide Captain Takahashi here in New Guinea were not born in the jungle. They were born in rooms with clean floors and dry air, thousands of miles away. Years earlier, Takahashi sat in a lecture hall in Japan, back straight, hands folded on his knees, listening to senior officers speak about war as if it were a test of character more than a contest of systems. Slides were unnecessary. The lessons were cultural, almost spiritual. Victory, they said, came from willpower, from discipline, from moral superiority. A soldier who endured hunger without complaint was strong. A soldier who endured pain without protest was worthy. A soldier who fell ill was suspect, not dishonorable perhaps, but lacking something essential. Illness was framed not as an external enemy, but as an internal failure. Sanitation in that context was tolerated but never emphasized. Latrines were dug because they had to be. Water was boiled when possible. Soap existed somewhere in the supply chain, but none of it was treated as decisive. None of it was central. It was background noise to the real business of war. What mattered was spirit. American doctrine, when it was discussed at all, was often treated with amused disdain. Reports filtered in about U.S. field manuals that obsessed over placement of waste pits, about medical officers who could override combat decisions, about soldiers ordered to swallow pills every day whether they liked it or not. To Japanese instructors, this was evidence of decadence. An army that feared dirt, they argued, would crumble when truly tested. In China, this belief seemed validated. Japanese units pushed through brutal conditions, forcing long marches, accepting casualties as the price of momentum. In Southeast Asia, they advanced through jungles and swamps faster than anyone thought possible. They suffered, but they kept moving. Hardship became proof. The conclusion felt obvious. Discomfort strengthened the Japanese soldier. Comfort weakened the enemy. But the jungle of New Guinea does not reward bravery the way battlefields do. It does not escalate suddenly, it erodes. By the time Takahashi arrives here, the first cracks are already present in his unit, though they aren't recorded in any official log. A corporal who asks to be excused from night duty, a private who starts sleeping through briefings, a sergeant who miscounts rations because his hands are shaking. Small things, easy to dismiss. The medical officer files quiet reports, mentions of fever clusters, of gastrointestinal illness, of infected feet. Takahashi reads them and nods. He writes the same phrase over and over. Men will endure. He believes it. He has endured. Hunger, cold, exhaustion. These are familiar enemies. They can be conquered by will. What he does not yet understand is that malaria does not negotiate. Dysentery does not respect rank. Infection does not respond to discipline. Across the lines, American commanders are having very different conversations. In U.S. camps, arguments break out between infantry officers who want to push forward and medical officers who insist the unit needs to stop and fix its sanitation first. Sometimes the medics win, sometimes they don't. But the argument exists, and that alone changes outcomes. American soldiers grumble openly. They curse the quinine that makes their mouths go numb and their stomachs churn. They complain about being ordered to drain water instead of rest. They laugh bitterly about how they spend more time policing camp hygiene than cleaning weapons. But they do it because the system demands it. American doctrine does not assume toughness will fix everything. It assumes men are fragile, that bodies break easily, that prevention is cheaper than replacement. It assumes nature is hostile by default. That assumption feels pessimistic. It is also correct. By late 1942, Japanese units inland begin reporting delays. Marches take longer. Patrols return short-handed. Night sentries are found asleep, not from laziness, but from exhaustion so deep it overrides fear. Fever becomes common enough that it's no longer noted unless it incapacitates a man completely. Diarrhea is joked about until it isn't. Skin infections are ignored until boots have to be cut away. Still, the doctrine does not bend. A man who complains is weak. A unit that slows is undisciplined. An officer who adapts risks criticism. So the system doubles down. Punishments increase. Lectures become harsher. Men are told to endure harder, to be tougher, to prove themselves worthy of their uniforms. And for a time they do. They endure. But endurance is not immunity. The jungle keeps its own schedule, and it does not care what men believe. As Takahashi's unit settles deeper into New Guinea's interior, the mosquitoes multiply. Rainwater collects in every depression. Latrines overflow during storms. Drinking sources blur together with waste runoff. Cuts stay wet. Skin never dries. The enemy is no longer just ahead. It is everywhere. And it is patient. The first man Captain Takahashi loses is not killed by gunfire. Private Hiroshi Nakamura is 21 years old. He is small-framed, quick-footed, reliable. The kind of soldier who never draws attention, never causes trouble, never complains. Takahashi notices him only because Nakamura always seems to be where he's supposed to be. Until one morning he isn't. Nakamura is late to formation. When he arrives jogging awkwardly from the tree line, his face is pale beneath the grime. Sweat pours off him, even though the morning is cool by jungle standards. When Takahashi's eyes meet his, Nakamura snaps to attention too quickly, almost losing his balance. "Report," Takahashi orders. Nakamura opens his mouth, closes it, swallows. "I am ready for duty, sir." His voice trembles. Takahashi studies him for a moment. The man's hands are shaking. Slightly, but enough. A weakness or fatigue. Takahashi chooses the explanation that aligns with doctrine. "See the medic," he says curtly, "then return." Nakamura bows and turns away. He does not return. By afternoon, the medical officer reports that Nakamura is delirious, fever spiking uncontrollably. Malaria. The officer requests permission to rest him for several days. Takahashi grants 1 day. By nightfall, Nakamura is screaming. The fever comes in waves, violent and disorienting. He claws at his own skin, begging for water, then vomiting it back up. Other men turn away unsettled. This is not the kind of suffering they were trained to expect. There is no enemy to curse, no wound to bind. By morning, Nakamura is unconscious. He dies 2 days later, no ceremony, no rifle volley. His body is wrapped in a poncho and buried quickly because the ground is too wet and the flies arrive within minutes. Takahashi records the death as illness. Then he moves on. Within a week, there are 3 more. Malaria does not arrive like a battle. It seeps in. One man collapses on patrol. Another cannot stand watch through the night. A third forgets simple instructions. Men begin swapping duties quietly, covering for one another, hiding symptoms out of fear. Not fear of death, but fear of shame. Dysentery follows. At first it's jokes, crude humor whispered in the dark. But the jokes fade as dehydration sets in. Men lose weight rapidly. Faces hollow. Cheekbones sharpen. Strength drains away faster than pride can replace it. Latrines overflow during heavy rain. Waste leaks into shallow streams. The line between drinking water and filth disappears. Still, the unit holds position. Still, Takahashi believes endurance will see them through. Across the jungle, American units are learning the same lessons, but responding differently. Private First Class. Thomas Miller hates quinine. He hates the taste. He hates the way it makes his ears ring and his stomach knot. Every morning he swallows it anyway, because the medic stands there watching. Every night he curses as he crawls under his mosquito net because it traps heat and sweat and smells like chemicals. But Miller stays on his feet. When his boots start rubbing raw spots into his heels, the medic notices before infection sets in. When a fever ripples through the platoon, it's caught early. When a water source looks suspicious, it's shut down, no matter how inconvenient that makes things. Miller doesn't think of it as strategy. He just knows he's still standing. By mid-1943, the contrast becomes stark. Japanese patrols return late, exhausted, confused. American patrols return tired, but coherent. Japanese sentries miss movement at night. American sentries complain, but stay awake. Japanese units shrink quietly as men fall out. American units hold their numbers. Disease is not evenly distributed. It is choosing sides. Back in Takahashi's camp, skin infections begin spreading. The constant moisture breaks down flesh. Small cuts turn red, then black. Feet swell, boots are loosened, then unlaced, then abandoned entirely. Men wrap their feet in rags that never dry. Marching becomes agony. Standing guard becomes torture. Still, no one asks to be relieved. Pride fills the gaps where strength used to be. One evening, Takahashi walks through the camp and notices how quiet it has become. No laughter, no idle chatter, just coughing, soft moans, the sound of insects. He tells himself this is normal, that this is what war looks like. But somewhere in the back of his mind, an unfamiliar thought forms. This feels different. It doesn't feel like fighting. It feels like being consumed. And the jungle, indifferent and endless, keeps working. By August, Captain Takahashi no longer counts his men in neat rows. He counts the boots. Each morning, he scans the camp for pairs that haven't moved since the night before. Boots beside ponchos, boots beside rifles, boots beside men who are awake but no longer useful, staring ahead with eyes dulled by fever. The jungle has changed the rhythm of the unit. Orders that once took minutes to execute now take hours. Patrols are planned, delayed, replanned, then quietly canceled when there aren't enough men who can walk without stumbling. Ammunition remains stacked neatly in crates. Rifles are cleaned less often, not from negligence, but because hands are shaking too badly to strip them properly. The medical officer submits reports almost daily now. Fever clusters, severe gastrointestinal illness, multiple cases of advanced fungal infection. Takahashi signs them all. He does not forward them upward. To do so would invite questions he cannot answer without indicting the doctrine he was trained to uphold. He convinces himself this is temporary, that once the rains ease, once the men acclimate, once replacements arrive, the balance will restore itself. But the jungle does not reset, it compounds. One night, a sentry fails to raise the alarm when American patrols pass within meters of the perimeter. When questioned later, the sentry weeps openly, ashamed. He says he heard something, but could not force his body to react. His fever had spiked, his vision blurred, his limbs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Takahashi disciplines him anyway. The punishment changes nothing. Across the lines, American units advancing cautiously begin noticing patterns that don't align with conventional enemy behavior. Resistance is sharp one day, non-existent the next. Machine gun positions that should dominate key terrain are silent. Mortar teams fire once, then stop, not because they're out of ammunition, but because the crew cannot reload quickly enough. An American lieutenant walks into a Japanese trench after a brief firefight and finds a heavy machine gun still mounted, belt threaded, safety off. No one is there to fire it. The lieutenant feels a chill that has nothing to do with the rain. This isn't retreat. This is absence. Medical intelligence officers begin putting words to what combat officers are seeing. Disease rates among Japanese units are catastrophic. Entire companies are being rendered ineffective without sustained contact. In some sectors, fewer than half the men listed on rosters are physically capable of fighting. The Americans adjust. They press, not recklessly, but relentlessly. Short advances, constant pressure, no long pauses. The Japanese units, already weakened, cannot rest. They cannot recover. They cannot relocate camps without leaving men behind. The jungle becomes an accomplice. In the Philippines, the same story unfolds with brutal consistency. On Leyte, Japanese defensive lines are dug near flooded paddies that shimmer at dusk with insect life. Monsoon rains arrive without warning, turning trenches into sewage channels. Latrines overflow. Waste seeps into everything. Men wake up sick and go to sleep sicker. Dysentery tears through battalions faster than replacements can arrive. Dehydration turns strong men into liabilities in days. Skin infections rot flesh so deeply that boots must be cut away. Officers issue harsher orders. They believe discipline will compensate for biology. It does not. An American medic on Leyte treats a captured Japanese soldier whose legs are wrapped in filthy cloth. When the cloth is removed, the skin beneath is cracked, swollen, blackened in places. The medic swears under his breath, "This is not a battlefield wound. This is neglect that has gone on for months." The prisoner avoids eye contact. Shame still matters even now. Back in New Guinea, Takahashi walks the perimeter one evening and realizes he no longer recognizes some of the faces he passes. Men have lost weight, cheeks hollowed, eyes sunk. The unit looks older, smaller, tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. He hears coughing from multiple directions. He smells rot everywhere. For the first time, he wonders if the Americans' rituals, the boiling water, the inspections, the nets, were not signs of fear, but of understanding. The thought disturbs him. He pushes it away. The following week, an American artillery barrage opens before dawn. It is not heavy, it is not prolonged, it is precise. When the shells stop, American infantry advances. Takahashi orders his men to hold. Some do, some try, some cannot lift their rifles fast enough. Others fire wildly, unfocused, panicked. A counterattack is ordered and collapses almost immediately when half the men stumble before reaching the tree line. Within hours, the position is lost, not taken, abandoned. As Takahashi withdraws with what remains of his unit, he finally understands something that had been invisible to him for months. This is not a series of bad days. This is systemic failure. The jungle has not weakened his men by chance. It has done so because it was allowed to. And now the jungle is in command. September 1943 arrives without ceremony. There is no single moment when Captain Takahashi can say the unit broke. No final stand. No decisive engagement. Instead, the strength bleeds out slowly, invisibly, until one morning he looks at the numbers and realizes they no longer mean anything. On paper, his battalion still exists. In reality, it barely functions. Men are present, but not effective. They can hold rifles, but not aim steadily. They can dig, but only for minutes before exhaustion forces them to sit down. They can march, but only in short bursts, stopping often, leaning against trees, breathing hard as if they've already fought a battle. Disease has stripped away something more important than manpower. It has stripped cohesion. Orders no longer ripple smoothly through the unit. Runners arrive late or not at all. Heavy weapons are left unmanned because no one can lift them quickly. Ammunition remains unused because there are not enough healthy men to carry it forward. Malaria peaks at night, stealing sleep before dawn movements. Men shiver violently beneath poncho, while sweat soaks through everything they own. Dysentery leaves them dehydrated before the day even begins. Skin infections turn standing watch into agony. This is not defeat. It is paralysis. Across the front, American commanders sense it. They don't celebrate. They don't fully understand it yet, but they feel the shift. Japanese resistance no longer bends, it fractures. Units that once counterattacked aggressively now withdraw after brief contact. Positions that should be held stubbornly are abandoned overnight. American patrols begin finding things that don't make sense. Supply caches left untouched. Machine guns emplaced but unmanned. Mortar pits with shells stacked neatly beside them, never fired. One American platoon sergeant walks through a freshly vacated Japanese position and mutters that it feels like walking through a hospital that lost its patients. Medical intelligence catches up quickly. Reports from prisoners, observations from medics, battlefield evidence. The conclusion becomes unavoidable. Japanese units are being hollowed out by disease faster than they can be reinforced. American commanders adjust their tactics accordingly. They increase pressure, not with reckless assaults, but with constant movement. Short advances force Japanese units to relocate, something sick men cannot do easily. Patrol harassment prevents rest. Encirclement tactics exploit the enemy's inability to reposition quickly or hold extended lines. This is not cruelty, it is math. War rewards the side that can still function under stress. For Japanese soldiers, the psychological toll is as devastating as the physical one. They are trained to fear dishonor more than death. But illness offers no honorable end, no charge, no last stand, only weakness, shame, and isolation. Men hide symptoms until collapse. They refuse to report sick. They swallow pain until it consumes them. They die quietly, often alone without witnesses. Some begin to whisper that the jungle itself is cursed, that spirits have turned against them, that something is wrong beyond tactics or leadership. Others cling even harder to doctrine, believing endurance will eventually break the enemy. But endurance requires strength, and strength is gone. In the Philippines, the same scenes repeat with brutal clarity. On Luzon, American units advancing through the interior encounter defensive lines that look formidable on maps but collapse on contact. Japanese soldiers fight fiercely when they can, but they cannot fight long. Attacks lose momentum within minutes. Counterattacks dissolve as men stumble, disoriented, fever-spiked. American patrols begin finding weapons cached and abandoned, not because their owners fled, but because they could no longer carry them. Captured Japanese soldiers no longer mock mosquito nets. They stare at them. They ask questions. Some quietly ask for quinine. Others drink American-treated water with visible relief, as if tasting something forbidden. One non-commissioned officer, captured after collapsing during a night movement, gestures weakly toward the jungle and says through an interpreter, "It is worse than the enemy." He isn't exaggerating. By late 1943, American commanders have learned something that will shape the rest of the Pacific War. Victory here is not only about firepower, it is about endurance. It is about logistics, medicine, discipline, and the unglamorous routines that keep men alive long enough to fight tomorrow. Sanitation becomes doctrine. Prevention becomes weaponry. The jungle has become a test, not of courage, but of preparation. And one army has failed it. As American forces prepare to push deeper into harsher terrain against desperate resistance, one truth becomes unavoidable. The jungle has already chosen a side, and it is not the one that laughed. December 2nd, 1943, 0710 hours. Edge of the Huon Peninsula, New Guinea. The sun breaks through the cloud cover for the first time in days, burning away the mist in uneven patches and revealing a battlefield that barely looks like one. There are no dramatic charges unfolding, no flags advancing, no lines colliding in fire and smoke, just American infantry moving forward methodically, step by step, through terrain that has already broken the enemy. A U.S. Army sergeant pauses and looks back at his men. They are filthy, beards matted, uniforms stained beyond recognition. Their boots are caked with mud that will never fully dry. Sweat has bleached salt lines into their web gear, but they are upright, alert, functional. That alone feels like victory. By now, sanitation is not a lesson, it is muscle memory. Men drain puddles without being told. They boil water automatically, even when they're exhausted and angry about it. Mosquito nets go up before rifles are cleaned. Feet are inspected after marches, no matter how long the day has been. Medics are obeyed, not argued with. No one pretends it's pleasant, but no one questions it anymore. American casualty rates from disease drop sharply compared to earlier jungle campaigns. Units stay in the line longer. Operational tempo increases. Commanders can plan beyond the next 24 hours because they know their men will still be standing tomorrow. This is not accidental. It is the result of institutional humility, the willingness to admit that nature is as dangerous as any enemy and often more patient. Across the shattered remnants of Japanese formations, the contrast is impossible to ignore. Men fight when they can, and when they do, they fight with a ferocity that earns respect from every American who encounters it. But those moments are fewer now, shorter, desperate. More often, Americans encounter sick men left behind with a rifle and a handful of rounds. Men who salute weakly when captured. Men whose bodies have already lost the war long before the fighting reached them. Japanese officers who survived these campaigns later speak quietly of regret. Not about courage, not about loyalty, about water, about insects, about things they were taught to ignore. Late in 1943, Japanese High Command quietly issues revised sanitation guidance. It is brief, vague, almost apologetic in tone. Water discipline is encouraged. Mosquito avoidance is mentioned. Soap appears in supply requests, but shipping capacity is gone. The perimeter has collapsed inward. The jungle is no longer something they can plan around. The reckoning has already arrived. An American major walking through a former Japanese camp stops at a shallow grave. A helmet rests on a stick above disturbed earth. No name, no marker. Just mud already reclaiming the dead beneath it. He does not feel triumph, only grim understanding. This is what happens when an army prepares only for bullets, and not for the environment that decides whether those bullets ever get fired. As 1943 draws to a close, the balance in the Pacific has shifted decisively. American troops are tired, dirty, scarred, but they are alive. They have learned to fight the jungle as ruthlessly as they fight the enemy. They have accepted that victory here is not won only by courage or aggression, but by discipline in the smallest, least glamorous details. The Japanese army, for all its bravery and sacrifice, fought this war with one hand tied behind its back, by its own beliefs. A doctrine that prized spiritual endurance above all else blinded it to a truth older than warfare itself. No army fights alone. It fights the land, the climate, the unseen forces that grind men down when leaders look away. Years later, veterans remember the jungle not for the firefights, but for the routines, the boiling water, the netting, the inspections. They remember how strange it felt at first, how excessive, how absurd, and how essential. Because in the Pacific, victory was often decided long before the shooting started. It was decided in camp discipline, in medical planning, in respect for the environment. The jungle did not reward bravery, it rewarded preparation. The jungle never sent a surrender notice. It never raised a white flag. It never acknowledged victory or defeat. It simply kept taking men. Long after firefights ended, long after artillery fell silent, long after maps were redrawn and objectives renamed, the jungle continued its work, patient, indifferent, relentless. It did not care who believed in spirit, who believed in doctrine, who believed they were invincible. It only cared whether an army respected reality. For the Japanese soldier, the jungle became a slow executioner. Not dramatic, not heroic, not something that could be answered with a charge or a bayonet. It weakened bodies quietly. It clouded minds. It turned discipline into punishment and courage into suffering without purpose. Men did not fall in glorious last stands. They collapsed on marches. They shook through nights of fever. They died staring at leaves and mud and insects, wondering what they had done wrong. And in many cases, the answer was nothing at all. They were brave. They were loyal. They endured. But bravery did not kill parasites. Loyalty did not purify water. Endurance did not stop infection. Across the same jungles, American soldiers suffered too. They hated the heat. They cursed the mud. They complained about the pills, the nets, the inspections, the endless rules that seemed to treat grown men like children. But those rules kept them alive. American victory in the Pacific was not just forged in steel and fire. It was forged in discipline that looked boring from the outside, in routines that felt excessive, in officers willing to listen to medics, in systems that accepted an uncomfortable truth that war is not just about fighting the enemy in front of you, it is about surviving everything around you. The American soldier did not win because he was tougher. He won because his army prepared him to last. That difference mattered. It meant that when the fighting came, American units arrived intact, cohesive, functional, able to think, maneuver, and adapt. While entire Japanese formations were hollowed out by disease, American formations remained dangerous, not fearless, prepared. This was not luck. It was institutional humility, the recognition that nature is as deadly as any opposing force and far more patient. The recognition that neglect kills just as effectively as bullets. The recognition that prevention is not weakness, it is strategy. The Pacific War did not forgive arrogance. It punished assumptions. It devoured armies that believed willpower could replace planning, and the jungle never forgot. Years later, veterans would struggle to explain this to people back home. They could describe firefights. They could describe explosions. But the true enemy, the one that took more men than combat in many sectors, was harder to put into words. It was the fever at night, the rot that wouldn't heal, the smell of sickness that never left the camp. It was the discipline to boil water when you were exhausted, to sleep under a net when you were drenched in sweat, to let a medic inspect your feet when your pride told you not to. Those small acts decided who lived long enough to fight another day. The jungle did not care about flags. It did not care about ideology. It did not care about who believed themselves superior. It rewarded preparation, and it punished neglect. That lesson, written in sweat and sickness and unmarked graves, shaped the rest of the war. It followed American forces from New Guinea to the Philippines, from Iwo Jima to Okinawa. It saved lives long before victory was declared. And it remains one of the most brutal truths of warfare. Wars are not only won by courage, they are won by the unglamorous discipline that keeps soldiers alive when no one is watching. Because in the end, the jungle never chose sides. It chose the army that respected it, and it destroyed the one that laughed.